Welcome, dear dreamers. Tonight, the sea is quiet, not empty, just waiting. There are stories that belong to the land, and there are stories that belong to the water. This is one of the oldest. It begins where the waves meet the dark, where the shoreline fades into mist, where something watches, not dangerous, not cruel, just unseen. Long ago, in the far northern seas, people spoke softly at night. They spoke of beings who were neither fully human nor fully animal. They spoke of shapes moving beneath the water, smooth, silent, watching the shore. Selkies. The name was never shouted. It was always whispered, as if the sea itself might hear, and perhaps it did. These were not creatures of fear. They were creatures of distance, of longing, of quiet change. This is the Sleepy LegendsChannel, where we explore myths, mysterious destinations, and legends. Settle in as we gently explore Selkies. By day, they were seals, dark eyes, gentle movements, resting on cold rocks beneath pale skies. But sometimes, only sometimes, they came ashore, and everything changed. The stories say it happens at night, when the tide pulls back just enough, when the moon lays silver across the water. That is when they emerge, slowly, carefully, as if crossing between worlds requires patience. A seal climbs onto the shore, still, silent, watching. Then it begins. The seal sheds its skin, not in violence, not in pain, but like slipping out of a dream. And beneath it is a human form, soft, pale, lit by moonlight. A Selkie. Half of the ocean still clings to them, in the way they move, in the way they listen. They do not belong fully to the land, not really, and they never will. These quiet beings live between worlds. They belong to the deep waters, to currents that never sleep. And yet, for a little while, they walk among us. The old storytellers knew this. They told these tales beside low burning fires. With the sound of waves in the distance, they spoke slowly, carefully, as if each word mattered, because it did. These were not just stories, they were memories, or something close to memory, something passed down like the rhythm of the tide. And always there was a feeling beneath the words, a quiet kind of wonder, a soft kind of sadness, because the Selkies never stay. They cannot. The sea calls them back, always, even when they walk on land, even when they try to belong. The ocean waits, and the ocean remembers. Tonight, you will hear 100 gentle truths about these beings, not all at once, never rushed. They will arrive like waves, one after another, soft, steady, unhurried, each one carrying you a little further from the shore, further from the noise, further from the day, and closer to rest. So settle in now. Let your breathing slow. Let the world grow quiet around you. Imagine the shoreline, a wide stretch of sand beneath a dim sky. The air cool, the tide low, and somewhere out there, just beyond the reach of sight, something moves. Not toward you, not away from you, just there, waiting. The water shifts, barely. A shape rises beneath the surface, smooth, dark, watching. A seal, perhaps, or something more. The moonlight touches the waves, and for a moment, everything feels suspended, as if time itself has softened, as if the world is holding its breath. This is where their stories begin, not with noise, not with certainty, but with stillness and the quiet understanding that not everything wishes to be known. Some things simply wish to be felt. So listen now, gently. The tide is beginning to turn. Under quiet silver light, the water stills. It does not freeze. It does not go dark. It simply settles, as if the sea itself has taken a long breath and decided not to release it yet. That is the feeling, the moment before a Selkie sheds her skin. There is a particular kind of silence that comes before transformation. It has weight to it, a fullness, like the last second before sleep reaches you. When you are still aware, still present, but already beginning to let go of the shape of yourself. The Selkies knew this silence well. They lived inside it. For those unfamiliar with the old stories, Selkies are creatures caught between two worlds. In the sea, they move as seals, broad and graceful, dark-eyed and unhurried. They dive deep without effort and surface slowly, exhaling long trails of mist into the cold air. But the sea is not their only home. When the moon is right, when the light falls soft and silver across the water, they come to the shore. They find a flat rock, a quiet cove, a stretch of sand that the tide has left behind. And there, carefully they remove their skins. Think for a moment about what that means. The skin is not simply a coat. It is not something draped over them like a cloak. It is the thing that makes them what they are. It holds their nature. It contains their power. It is the bridge between what they are inside, something ancient and feeling and longing, and the world they move through on the outside. To remove it is to become vulnerable in a way most creatures never experience. To remove it is also to become something else entirely. Beneath the sealskin, the Selkie becomes human in form. Pale, usually. Hair dark and salt damp. Eyes still carrying that deep quality. That sense of distance. That marks them as something not quite from here. Their feet are unsteady at first on the rock. The land does not hold them the way the sea does. The sea holds everything. The land only holds what touches it. They walk as if remembering how to walk. They breathe differently. The air is sharper on land, thinner, in a way the body has to adjust to. They stand in the cold and look toward the places where people have their lights on, where fires are kept, where life is being lived in a different way. The sealskin, meanwhile, is folded. This detail matters. It is always folded, not dropped, not left carelessly, folded with a kind of tenderness that says everything about what it means to them. Pressed flat against the rock, sometimes wedged into a crevice where the stone will hold it, sometimes tucked beneath a shelf of moss where the damp will keep it soft. Imagine it for a moment. The rock is cold and dark. The moon has made it silver. The water moves just below, very quiet, with that low sound it makes when the wind is far away. The sealskin rests against the stone, still, as if it is sleeping, as if waiting. There is a story passed down through the coastal communities of Ireland and Scotland about a fisherman who came upon a Selkie in the act of transformation. He had not meant to. He had been walking the shore at night because he could not sleep. the way people do when something unnamed is troubling them. His boots were wet. The rocks were slippery. He heard something before he saw anything. Not a sound he could name. Not quite a breath and not quite a wave. Something in between. He rounded the point of the cove and stopped. A woman was standing on the flat rock in the center of the water. She was very still. The moonlight made her look like she was carved from something. The sealskin was already off. It lay folded beside her feet, dark against the pale stone. He stood without moving. She did not see him, or perhaps she knew he was there and chose not to look. Sometimes in the old stories, that distinction does not matter. Seeing and being seen are not always separate events. What the man remembered afterward was not the transformation itself. He had arrived after it. What he remembered was the stillness, the way she stood with her face toward the sea, the way the skin lay on the rock as though it had its own breath, its own patience. He said it did not feel like he had witnessed something magical. It felt like he had witnessed something private, something that the night had allowed him to see because he had come quietly and meant no harm. He turned and walked back the way he had come. He did not tell anyone for many years. The vulnerability of the sealskin is one of the most recurring themes in Selkie lore. Without it, the Selkie cannot return to the sea. This is not metaphor. In the stories, this is literal and absolute. A Selkie without her skin stands at the edge of the water and cannot cross. The sea is right there. She can feel it. She can hear it. She knows it the way you know your own home, in the body, without having to think, but she cannot go back. It is a very particular kind of longing, not the longing for something you have never had. That kind can be soothed. It can be shaped into something livable over time. This is the longing for something you are, for a part of yourself that has been removed. It lives in the chest, in the old stories, low and constant, like the sound of the sea heard through a wall. There are quieter moments too, not just the grief, not just the longing. There are Selkies who came to shore by choice, who wanted, for a time, to walk and speak and sit beside a fire, who found something genuine in the human world, even while holding the ache of their separation from the sea. In these stories, the night before a Selkie returns to the water is described with particular care. She goes to the shore before the others are awake. The sky is still dark but beginning to change. There is that hour. You may know it, when the light has not yet arrived, but the darkness has already begun to recede. Everything is very still. She finds the place where she left her skin. She sits beside it for a while before she puts it on. Not because she is uncertain, because this moment deserves to be held, because transformation should not be rushed, because some part of her knows that once she is back in the water, she will carry the memory of standing on land, and she wants that memory to be complete. She wants to remember the cold, the silence, the particular way the rocks smelled before sunrise. She puts the skin on. The sea receives her without question. The northern seas do not welcome easily. They are cold in a way that is different from simply cold. There is a weight to the water there, a darkness beneath the surface that does not invite curiosity. The waves do not sparkle the way water does in warmer places. They move in long, slow rolls, gray and pewter, and occasionally the deep green of old glass. This is where the stories begin. Not in a library, not in a book. In a place where the wind comes in off the water and the fires are kept burning long into the night, and the people who live there have learned, over many generations, that the sea is not simply water. It is something else. Something that has its own intentions. Scotland and Ireland hold the oldest Selkie traditions. The Orkney Islands, the Hebrides, the western coast of Ireland where the land meets the Atlantic, and there is nothing beyond it for a very long time. These are places where the boundary between the human world and the other world has always been understood as thin. Where the people who lived there knew that naming something did not mean you understood it. And the sea, above all things, resisted being named. The Selkies belonged to that resistance. They were part of the sea's refusal to be only what it appeared to be. The earliest tellings did not use the word Selkie. The word came later, from the Old Scots, rooted in a term for seal. But the creature itself, the idea of it, is older than any word that was given to it. It existed first as a feeling, a thing noticed at the edge of perception, a shape in the water that did not move quite the way a seal moves, eyes that held something in them that an animal's eyes do not usually hold. The feeling came first, the story came after, and the story was the way the feeling was passed on. Imagine the room where this happens. The fire is low but steady. The kind of fire that has been burning for hours and has settled into itself, throwing more heat than light now. The walls are stone. The wind outside is working at every gap it can find. The people in the room are close together, not because they are afraid, because that is how warmth is shared. Someone begins to speak, not loudly. There is no need for loudness in a room like that. The voice settles into the space the way the firelight does, quietly, without asking permission. The story it carries is about the sea. It is always about the sea. In the oral tradition of the Scottish Islands, Selkies occupied a very specific place. They were not demons. They were not gods. They were not simple animals caught in the wrong shape. They existed in a register that the tradition seemed to reserve for things that carried genuine mystery, things that inspired not fear exactly and not wonder either, but something that sat between the two, something closer to recognition, as if the people telling these stories understood, at some level, that the Selkies represented something true about the world, that nature contained depths that the human eye could not fully reach, that the sea and the creatures that belonged to it held knowledge of a kind that landbound creatures could only glimpse. The Selkie was that glimpse. There is a moment in many of the old stories that deserves to be held a little longer. It is the moment of first seeing. A fisherman goes out before dawn. The water is very still. The sky is just beginning to separate itself from the sea. That slow process where you start to be able to tell where one ends and the other begins. He is not thinking about anything in particular. He is doing what he has always done. Watching the water, reading its surface the way his father taught him to read it. And then he sees something. On a rock, out past the point where no one should be. A figure. He does not call out. He does not reach for anything. He simply goes still in the way that people go still when they sense that whatever they are seeing is not meant to be interrupted. The figure does not move. The water does not move. The sky continues its slow change. He watches until the light shifts enough that he can no longer say for certain what he saw. He turns the boat and goes home. He does not speak of it at breakfast. He carries it through the morning, through the afternoon, through the evening meal. It is only later, when the children are asleep and the fire has been built up again, and the night has settled fully into the house, that he speaks. His wife listens without interrupting. When he finishes, she is quiet for a moment. Then she says, "My grandmother saw something like that once." And so the story continues, passed from one hand to the next, from one fire to the next, growing slowly, the way things grow when they are kept warm. The dual nature of the Selkie is the center of everything. Seal in the water, human on the land, not one pretending to be the other, both fully, depending on the world they are moving through. This idea appears across many cultures and many traditions, but in the northern stories it carries a particular texture. Perhaps because the sea in those places is so present, so unavoidable. You cannot live on an island in the Hebrides and pretend the sea is not the governing fact of your existence. It determines what you eat. It determines whether the boats go out. It determines in many ways whether you survive. And so the creature that belonged to both worlds would have meant something specific there. Not just a fairy tale, something more like a mirror. Here is a smaller moment worth pausing on. A child on the shore, maybe 7 or 8 years old, watching a group of seals resting on the rocks at low tide. This is ordinary. This is something the child has seen many times. The seals are gray and heavy looking out of the water, awkward in the way seals always are on land, hauled up and patient. But one of them turns its head and looks directly at the child, not the vague, unfocused gaze of an animal registering movement. A look, direct and unhurried. The kind of look that takes a moment to process because it contains something you did not expect to find there. The child does not run, does not shout, looks back. They stay like that for a long moment. The child on the shore, the seal on the rock, the water moving between them. And then the seal turns away and the moment is over and the child walks home and says nothing to anyone, but remembers. For the rest of a long life, remembers. The Selkie stories spread because they were useful. Not useful in a practical sense. Not a lesson about safety or behavior or what to do when the tide comes in. Useful in the deeper sense. The way all good stories are useful. They gave people a language for something they already felt, but could not quite say. The sea is more than we understand. We belong to it in ways we cannot fully explain. There is something in the deep water that is like us, and we are something that is a little like the deep water. These are old feelings. They live in people who have never heard of Selkies and never will. But for the communities of the northern coasts, the Selkie stories were the shape those feelings took. They were the vessel the feeling traveled in, from generation to generation, from one low fire to the next. And so the tradition held. Through the centuries, when the old ways were being replaced by newer explanations for older mysteries, through the times when speaking of such things might have drawn suspicion, through the long stretches of ordinary life, fishing and mending and raising children and losing people and carrying on. The stories held because they were true. Not factually, not in the way a map is true. True in the way that a certain quality of light on the water is true. The way the feeling of standing at the edge of the sea at dusk is true. Something in the body that knows it. Something older than words. The northern waters are cold. They are gray and deep, and they keep their secrets. And in the old stories, the Selkies are there, patient and unhurried, moving through the dark water like something that has always known exactly where it belongs. The tide knows what it is doing. It does not hurry. It does not forget. It comes in the way it has always come in, following something so old and so constant that the word rhythm does not quite capture it. Rhythm implies something made, something chosen. What the tide follows is older than choosing. It simply is. And the Selkies in the old stories understood this in their bodies. They did not follow the tide the way you follow a path. They moved with it the way breathing moves with the lungs, without deciding to, without needing to think about it. The tide pulled and they felt it. The tide released and they felt that too. They were tuned to it. The way old wood is tuned to the weather. There are certain hours that belong to the shore, not the daytime hours. Those belong to the fishermen, to the boats going out and coming back, to the work of living beside the sea. The hours that belong to the shore in a different sense are the late ones, the ones that most people sleep through without knowing what they are missing. The hour when the tide is at its fullest and then begins, almost imperceptibly, to release. The hour when the moon is directly overhead and the water below it goes very flat and very bright. The hour when the wind drops and the only sound is the slow movement of water against stone. Those hours, that is when the Selkies came to dance. The word dance needs to be held loosely here. It was not dancing the way people dance in a hall with music and partners and steps that have been learned. It was something older than that. Something more like the movement of water itself. The way a current moves, without a beginning point and without an end point. Continuous, unfolding. They moved on the shore, and they moved at the edge of the water, and they moved in the shallows where the sea came up around their feet and withdrew again and came up again. The moon lit all of it. The moon lit all of it, and the water carried the light back, and the whole shore became something that was neither fully dark nor fully bright, but something in between. Something that does not have a name in most languages. The Selkies moved through it without effort. In the stories from the Orkney Islands, the full moon gatherings are described with a consistency that suggests something more than imagination at work. The details repeat. The flat rock, the particular curve of the cove that sheltered the gathering from the wind, the sound of the water, which was different during those hours, lower, more deliberate, as if the sea was keeping its voice down out of respect for what was happening on its shore. And the Selkies themselves, moving together without colliding, without any apparent signal or direction, as if the same thing that moved the tide also moved them, as if they were all listening to the same sound that no one else could hear. There is a woman in one of the older tellings who lived near such a cove. She was not young when this story was set down. She had lived her whole life on the island. She had been born in the house her grandmother had been born in, and she expected to die there too, which she eventually did. She said she had seen the gathering 3 times in her life. The first time she was a girl. She had gotten up in the night for water and seen the light on the water through the small window above the basin and gone outside without thinking about it, the way children do, without the hesitation that adults learn. She walked to the edge of the cove and stood behind the large stone that sat at its entrance and looked. She said she could not count them. The light made counting difficult. They were moving, and the water was moving, and the moon was moving in its slow way, and everything was in motion except her. She stood there for a long time. She was not frightened. She said that was the thing she always wanted people to understand. She was not frightened at all. She felt the way you feel when you are inside something that is larger than you, but that means you know good harm. The way you feel standing in an old forest, or watching a storm from inside a safe room. Small, but not threatened. Present, but not intruding. She went back to bed and slept better than she had in months. The second time she saw them, she was a young woman, newly married. Her husband was away on the mainland for 2 weeks on business. She did not fully understand, and she had been sleeping poorly in his absence. She went to the shore at the hour she remembered from childhood. She did not go to hide this time. She sat openly on the stone and watched. The gathering was smaller that night. 6 or 7 of them, she thought, though again the light made certainty difficult. They moved at the water's edge, and the water moved with them, and there was a sound she had not noticed the first time. Very soft, very low, not singing exactly, not language, something between the two. The kind of sound that does not ask to be understood, that asks only to be heard. She listened until the moon moved past the highest point of the sky, and the light on the water began to change. Then she went home. She kept both fires burning that night and sat between them until morning. The third time she was old. Her husband was gone by then. Her children were grown and scattered to other islands, other lives. She was alone in the house her grandmother had been born in, and she slept lightly the way the old do, every small sound finding her. The light on the water woke her. She did not dress carefully. She put on her coat and her boots, and she walked to the shore, and she did not hide behind the stone this time. She walked all the way to the flat rock at the entrance to the cove, and she sat down on it. The Selkies were already there. For a long time, nothing changed. She sat. They moved. The water moved. The moon held everything in its pale light. And then one of them came closer. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to see clearly. It stood at the edge of the shallows and looked at her with those eyes. The ones she remembered from childhood. The ones that held something in them that most eyes do not hold. She looked back. After a while it turned and rejoined the others. She sat on the rock until the gathering dispersed, until the Selkies returned to the water one by one, unhurried, the way they did everything, until the last of them slipped beneath the surface, and the cove was just a cove again. She walked home. She did not feel sad. She felt complete, the way a long story feels when it ends at the right moment. The tides do not rest. This is one of the true things about the world that the Selkie stories seem to know. There is no pause in the cycle. No moment where the water stops and waits. Even at the still point, at the very top of the tide or the very bottom, when the water seems motionless, it is already in the process of becoming the next thing, already turning. The Selkies lived inside that turning. They were not creatures of the shore or the sea. They were creatures of the movement between the two, the going and the returning, the filling and the releasing. They belong to the rhythm itself, not to either side of it. Here's what it sounds like. The wave comes in. It lifts over the shallow stones and spreads flat across the sand with a sound like breath. Then it slows, pauses. That pause that is barely a pause at all. And then the pull back, the long quiet draw of water retreating over stone. The small sounds of pebbles rolling, the silence after. And then the next wave, coming in. The Selkies move through this the way the waves moved through it, continuously, without resistance, without the effort that other creatures bring to moving through the world. They were not fighting anything. They were part of it. The moon continues its work above all of this, pulling at the water, pulling at everything that is mostly water, which includes the sea and the tides, and, in some older ways of thinking, the bodies of the creatures that live within them. In those older ways of thinking, the Selkies felt the moon the way an instrument feels a certain note, a resonance, a response that happens before thinking happens. The moon rises. Somewhere in the cold northern water, something stirs. The tide begins its turn. The shore, in the hour before dawn, is very quiet. The flat rocks are empty. The water moves against them steadily, patiently, the way it has always moved. And if there are shapes in the water just beyond where the light reaches, you would have to be very still to see them. Very quiet, and already most of the way to sleep. There are stories the shoreline keeps, stories that do not fade, stories that return like the tide. Some are gentle, some are not. This is one of both. It begins the same way. It often does. A figure on the shore, a quiet night, a moment that feels almost still, and something left behind. A seal skin, soft, dark, resting on cold stone. It should not be taken, and yet, sometimes it is. The stories say that when a human finds it, everything changes. Not at once, not loudly, but slowly, like a current turning beneath calm water. Because without the skin, the Selkie cannot return. And so they remain, on land, in a world that does not fully hold them. There are tales of what happens next. They are told in quiet voices, often with a kind of sadness beneath the words. A human and a Selkie, bound not by choice alone, but by circumstance. And yet, sometimes something like love begins to grow. Not easily, not completely, but gently, like something trying to exist between two tides. There is one story, often told along the northern coasts. A man lived near the edge of the sea. His home was small, built of stone and weathered wood. The wind passed through often. The sound of waves never left. One evening, he walked along the shore. The tide was low. The rocks stretched far into the dim light, and there, among them, he found it, a seal skin. He did not know why he took it. Perhaps he thought it abandoned. Perhaps he did not think at all. He carried it home, quietly, and hid it, not far, but out of sight. When he returned to the shore the next night, she was there, not in seal form, not hidden, standing, looking toward the sea. Her expression was still, but something beneath it moved, a searching, a knowing. She turned when he approached. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the space between them changed. He spoke, softly. She listened. Days passed, then more. She remained, not by choice alone, but by absence, and in that absence something began to form. A shared life, simple, quiet. They lived near the shore. They always did. She moved through the days with a calm presence. Her hands learned the rhythms of the home, the fire, the water. But there were moments, small, almost unnoticed, when she would pause, look outward, toward the horizon, as if listening to something too distant to hear. The man saw this, but said nothing, because some things cannot be answered. Time moved. Softly, they spoke more, shared more. There were even moments of warmth, a quiet smile, a shared silence that did not feel empty. And still the sea remained, always there, always waiting. One night, the wind was softer than usual. The tide had drawn far back. The shore felt wide, open. She stood outside the home, barefoot. The cold did not seem to touch her. The man watched from the doorway. He knew something had changed, not suddenly, but completely. She turned to him. There was no anger, no blame, only a quiet understanding. She walked past him, into the home, and reached for the place where the skin had been hidden, because she had always known, not from the beginning, but from the way the world felt, from the way something was missing. She held the skin now, gently, like something remembered. The man stepped forward, but stopped, because there was nothing to say, nothing that could hold her there. She looked at him once more, and in that look was everything. The time they had shared, the quiet, the warmth, and the distance that had always been there. Then she turned, walked toward the shore, each step slow, certain. The water waited. She slipped into the skin, and the change returned, soft, complete. The seal moved into the sea without sound, gone, not lost, only returned. The man remained. The shore was the same. The waves moved as they always had. But something was different, something quiet, something lasting. He would carry it with him, always. These stories do not end in anger. They do not end in blame. They end in knowing, because the Selkie was never meant to stay. Not fully, not forever. There are other moments told in softer tones. A woman once spoke of her grandmother. She said the old woman would sit by the window each night, looking toward the sea, not speaking, not moving, just watching. Sometimes she would hum, softly, a tune that did not belong to the land. The child asked her why. The old woman smiled, but did not answer, because some answers are not meant to be spoken, only felt. In another place, far from any village, a man lived alone. He was known to walk the shore at dusk, always at the same time, always in silence. Some said he had once lived with someone who had left, not suddenly, but completely. He never denied it. He never confirmed it. He simply walked and listened, as if the sea might speak or return what it had taken. But the sea does not take. It only calls back what belongs to it. These stories linger because they hold something true, not in detail, but in feeling, the connection between worlds, the pull between staying and returning, the quiet weight of both. Love, in these stories, is not loud. It does not claim. It does not hold tightly. It exists in moments, shared, felt, and then released. It was not gone, only changed, only carried somewhere deeper. And now, as the tide begins to rise again, the shore grows smaller. The water moves closer, soft, steady. The horizon fades into night, and somewhere beneath the surface, something moves. Not toward, not away, just within its own quiet path. The stories remain, like the sound of waves in the distance, never gone, only quieter. The tide has risen, not quickly, not all at once, just enough to change the shape of the shore. The rocks are darker now. The water rests closer to the land, and the line between them feels softer, less certain. There are places like this, where one world leans into another, where nothing is fully one thing or the other. This is where the Selkies live, not only in the sea, not only on land, but between. The stories say they learn both worlds, but never fully belong to either, and that knowing stays with them, even in stillness. There is a story told in low voices of a child born near the edge of the sea. The night was calm, the air held no wind, the waves moved in slow, steady lines. Inside a small home, a woman rested, her breathing soft, her gaze distant. She had lived there for years, long enough to be known, long enough to be trusted, but there were things about her that remained untouched. She walked the shore often, even in cold weather, even when others stayed inside. She listened more than she spoke, and when she spoke, her words were careful, as if chosen from somewhere deeper. The child was quiet when it arrived, not crying, not restless, just watching. Its eyes were wide, dark, reflective, like still water at night. The years passed gently. The child grew. It learned the rhythms of the land, the warmth of fire, the sound of voices. But there were moments, small ones, when something else surfaced. The child would wander to the edge of the sea, stand there, still, as if listening, not to the waves, but to something beneath them. One evening, the sky was dim with fading light. The horizon blurred into soft gray. The child walked farther than usual, past the rocks, past the familiar places, until the shore opened wide and empty. No footprints, no sound, only the tide. The child stepped into the water, slowly, without hesitation. The cold did not seem to matter. The water reached its ankles, then its knee. And still it did not stop. From a distance, the mother watched. She did not call out. She did not run. She only stood there, because she understood, not with fear, but with recognition. The child paused, The water moved around it, soft, constant. Then, just as slowly, it stepped back, returned to the shore, returned to her. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. Some things are not questions. Only moments. Only reminders. This is how it is for them. A life lived in two directions. One foot on land. And he always turned toward the sea. There is another story, quieter still. A man once spoke of his brother. He said the brother would wake before dawn, every day, not for work, not from habit, but from something else. He would walk to the shoreline, stand there in the dim light, and wait. The sea was calm at that hour, barely moving. The sky held no color yet, only a soft, distant gray. One morning, the man followed him, not closely, not enough to disturb, just far enough to see. The brother stood at the water's edge, still. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. The water covered his feet, then his legs. He did not stop. The man felt something shift. Not fear, something quieter, something that did not belong to him. The brother paused, turned slightly, as if aware, as if hearing something beyond the world behind him. Then he stepped back, returned to the shore, walked past without a word, and from that day on, the man never followed again, because he understood. Or perhaps he chose not to. The Selkies carry this always. Even in moments of calm, even in shared lives, there is a distance that cannot be crossed. Not by effort, not by time, only by the sea. And the sea does not share. It holds. It waits. There are quieter moments too. A woman once sat beside a low fire. The room was dim, the light soft and warm. Outside, the wind moved gently along the shore. She held a small shell in her hand, turning it slowly, again and again, as if it carried something more than shape, a memory, a sound. She pressed it to her ear, closed her eyes, and listened, not to the ocean alone, but to something within it, something familiar, something just beyond reach. She opened her eyes after a time, set the shell down, and returned to stillness. The fire moved. The room remained quiet, but something had passed through her, something that did not stay. These are the lives between worlds, not divided, not balanced, just lived, moment by moment, with a quiet awareness of what cannot be held. The land offers warmth, shelter, voice. The sea offers depth, silence, belonging. And between them, the Selkies move, not choosing one over the other, but never free from either. It is not a struggle, not always. Sometimes it is simply a knowing. A quiet pull that never leaves. It was not gone, only waiting, only beneath the surface. And now, as the tide continues to rise, the shoreline fades once more. The water reaches the rocks, covers them slowly. The path between land and sea grows thinner, softer, and somewhere out there, just beyond sight, something moves again. Not separate, not divided, just as it has always been. The village rests close to the sea, not too close, but close enough to hear it. The waves are always there, soft, steady, a constant breath against the shore. The houses are small, stone walls, low roofs worn by wind and time. Light glows faintly from a few windows, warm, dim, never bright enough to disturb the night. The people here move quietly. They always have. Voices are softer near the sea. Steps are slower. Doors close with care, because the shoreline listens, and what lives beyond it listens too. In places like this, stories are not told loudly. They are shared in passing, in fragments, a sentence here, a glance there. Nothing is explained fully. It does not need to be. There is an understanding that settles into the village, like mist, like salt in the air. Seals are never disturbed, not when they rest on the rocks, not when they move along the water's edge. Even the children know this. They are taught without being told. A mother once took her child to the shore at dusk. The sky was dim, the horizon soft and fading. A group of seals lay across the rocks, still, silent. The child stepped forward, curious. The mother placed a hand on their shoulder, gentle, a quiet pause. The child looked up. No words were spoken, but something passed between them, a small understanding. They stayed where they were, watching from a distance, and after a time, the seals slipped into the water, one by one, gone, not frightened, just returning. The child did not ask why. Some questions never form. In another part of the village, an old man mended his nets. His hands moved slowly, worn, steady. The fire beside him gave off a soft glow. Outside, the wind shifted gently. A younger fisherman sat nearby, watching, waiting. The old man did not look up, but after a while he spoke, not as instruction, not as warning, just a quiet offering. He said the sea gives what it wishes and keeps what it must. He said some things are not meant to be taken. The younger man listened. The words settled slowly, like something that would be understood later. Not now, not fully, but someday. These are the ways knowledge moves here. Not in lessons, not in rules, but in moments, in pauses, in the space between words. There is a path that leads down to the shore, narrow, worn smooth by years of quiet steps. It curves between low grasses and scattered stones. At night, it fades into shadow. But those who walk it do not need to see. They know where it leads. They always have. One evening, a woman followed that path alone. The sky was heavy with low cloud, the light dim and distant. The sea was calm, too calm. She stopped near the edge of the rocks, listened. There was no wind, no call of birds, only the faint movement of water against stone. Then she saw them, shapes along the far edge of the shore, still, watching, seals, or something like them. She did not move closer, did not call out. She simply stood there, breathing slowly, present. After a time, one of the shapes shifted, turned slightly, and then, without sound, it slipped into the water. The others followed, one by one, gone. The woman remained where she was, because something in her knew. This was not a moment to follow, only to witness. The village holds many such moments, small, unspoken. They gather over time, layered like sand along the shore. There are offerings left sometimes, not as ritual, not as demand, just as quiet gestures. A shell placed on a stone, a small piece of bread, something simple, something given without expectation. By morning, they are often gone. Not always, but often enough. And no one speaks of it directly. They do not ask where it went, because the answer is not needed. There is a sense here, a calm agreement between the village and the sea, a respect that does not need to be named. Children grow into it. Slowly, they learn to watch without reaching, to listen without calling, to stand at the edge and remain still. It is not taught in words. It is learned in quiet. One night, long after the village had settled into sleep, a boy woke to a sound. Not loud, just different. He stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky dim with distant light. He walked toward the path, barefoot. The ground was cold beneath him. He followed the curve of the trail, down to the shore. The sea stretched out before him, wide, endless, and there, near the water's edge, stood a figure, still, facing the horizon. The boy did not speak, did not move closer. He only watched. The figure remained for a long time. Then slowly, it stepped forward into the water, without hesitation, without sound, and then it was gone. The surface of the sea closed softly, as if nothing had passed through at all. The boy stood there. The moment settled around him. Not frightening, not confusing, just quiet. When he returned to the village, he said nothing, because there were no words for it, and none were needed. This is how the stories live here, not in telling, but in knowing, in the way the wind moves through the grass, in the way the tide returns each night, in the way the people pause when they reach the shore. It was never about certainty, only about presence. The sea does not explain itself, and neither do those who belong to it. They are felt, in glimpses, in moments that do not stay. The village remains, the lights dim, the fires fade, and the shoreline rests beneath the night once more. But something is always there, just beyond the edge of sight, not hidden, only waiting, only part of a world that moves quietly beside this one. And those who live here understand, not fully, but enough. The sea is deeper now. The shoreline has faded behind you. The land feels far away, not gone, just distant. Here, the water moves differently, slower, heavier. The surface still reflects the sky. Soft light, faint silver drifting across small waves. But below, everything changes. The light dims. The sound softens. The world becomes wide and quiet. This is where the Selkies travel. Not near the shore. Not where the rocks break the tide. But farther out, where the water holds its secrets. They move with ease here, without effort, without sound. Their bodies slip through the currents, guided by something older than thought. There are no footsteps here, no paths to follow, only motion, only flow. A Selkie dives beneath the surface. The last light fades above. Cool darkness surrounds them, not empty. Never empty. There are shapes in the distance. Slow, massive, a whale passes through the deep. Its movement is steady, unhurried. The water shifts around it, soft waves forming in its wake. The Selkie turns slightly, not startled, only aware. They move alongside for a time, not touching, not following closely, just near, two beings in the same vast space. The whale exhales, a distant sound, low, resonant. It travels through the water like a memory. The Selkie feels it, not with ears, but through everything. Then the whale descends, slowly, into darker water, gone from sight, not lost, only deeper. The Selkie continues. There is no need to hurry. Time moves differently here, not measured in hours, not marked by light, only by movement, only by presence. There are others. Dolphins pass in the distance, quick, graceful. They turn and circle, their bodies catching the last traces of light. For a moment, they draw closer, curious, a brief crossing of paths. Then they are gone, like flashes of motion fading into blue. The Selkie drifts lower. The water cools. The light fades further. Everything softens. Edges blur. Sound becomes distant. There is no fear here. Only calm. Only depth. This is where the ocean holds its quiet, where movement becomes slower, where even thought begins to settle. There is a place where the current changes, not sharply, just enough to be felt. The Selkie pauses, suspended. The water moves around them, gentle, endless. They do not resist it. They never do. Because here, there is no need to choose direction. The ocean carries, always. There are moments when the surface feels very far away, almost unreal, like something remembered. The Selkie closes their eyes, just for a moment, and listens, not for sound, but for rhythm. The slow pulse of the sea, the steady movement of water across unseen distances. It is constant. It is familiar. It is home. There is a story told of a Selkie who traveled far beyond the known waters, farther than most would go, farther than the edges of memory. The journey began without intention, just a movement outward, a drifting path that continued. The currents were stronger there, not rough, but deeper, pulling in directions that did not lead back. The Selkie followed, not out of curiosity, but because the water moved that way. Days passed, or something like days. Time had no shape there. The light above faded to almost nothing. Only a dim glow remained. Then even that was gone. The water became dark, not frightening, just complete. The Selkie slowed, not from effort, but from stillness. Movement felt unnecessary. There was nothing to reach, nothing to leave behind, only presence. Then, in the distance, something shifted. A faint glow, soft, almost unnoticed. It moved gently through the dark. Another being, not large, not fast, just drifting, carrying its own small light. The Selkie watched, did not follow, did not turn away, only remained. The glowing shape passed slowly, then disappeared into the dark. and the ocean returned to stillness. The Selkies stayed there for a long time, or what felt like a long time. Then, without urgency, they turned, not because something called them back, but because the current shifted again, and slowly, the water guided them upward. The light returned, faint at first, then softer, then clearer. The surface came back into view, a distant shimmer above. The Selkie rose toward it, not quickly, just steadily, and when they reached it, the world above was waiting. Sky, air, light, all unchanged, as if no time had passed at all. This is the way of the deep. It does not hold. It does not mark. It simply is. There are smaller moments too. A Selkie resting just below the surface. The water above shifting with wind. Light breaking into soft patterns. They remain still, watching the movement from below. The world above feels distant, not unreachable, just separate. In another moment, a school of fish moves as one. Thousands of small bodies turning together. Silver flashes in dim light. The Selkie passes through them. The movement parts, then closes again behind. No disruption, only flow. Everything here belongs to motion. Nothing remains still for long. And yet, everything feels calm, because nothing resists. Nothing holds. The Selkies understand this. They do not move against the water. They move within it. And so they remain part of it. Always. The sea is not separate from them. It is not a place they visit. It is a place they return to. Again and again. It was never gone. Only beneath the surface. Only waiting in quiet depth. And now, as the current shifts once more, the Selkie drifts upward again. The light grows softer. The surface nears. And somewhere beyond it, the shoreline waits. Not calling, not pulling, just there, as it has always been. The sky begins to change. Not suddenly, not all at once. The light grows softer. The horizon fades into a muted gray. The air feels heavier. The sea notices first. It always does. The surface shifts in small ways. Waves lose their rhythm. The water darkens beneath the dimming sky. Nothing is sharp. Nothing is loud. Just a quiet turning. Along the shore, the wind moves differently now. It does not rush. It drifts, cool against the skin, carrying a scent of distant rain. The village feels it, not as alarm, not as fear, only as a change. Doors close a little earlier. Voices grow softer. Steps slow as evening settles in. And out beyond the rocks, something else begins to stir. The Selkies move with the weather, not to escape it, not to avoid it, but because they are part of it. As Selkie rises just beneath the surface, the sky above is dim and shifting. Clouds stretch long across the fading light. The water carries a quiet tension, not harsh, not restless, just waiting. The Selkie drifts closer to the shore, not fully emerging, only near enough to feel the edge of the land. The wind brushes the surface. Small ripples form. The Selkie pauses, listens. There are no words in this, no clear signal, only a sense, a knowing that something is about to arrive. Far out, beyond sight, the clouds gather more closely. The light narrows. The sea grows darker, but still it remains calm. This is the space before a storm. Not loud, not broken, just held. There is a story told of a night like this. A fisherman stood at the edge of the shore. His boat rested behind him. The nets were prepared, but he did not leave. The sky felt wrong, not dangerous, just different. The air pressed softly against him. The water lay too still. He watched the horizon, and then he saw them. Several shapes near the rocks. Low, still, seals, or something like them. They were gathered closer than usual, not scattered, not moving apart, together, watching the same distant point. The fisherman remained where he was. Something in him told him not to move closer. The wind shifted again, a little stronger now. The water responded, small waves forming. The shapes began to move, not away from the shore, but along it, gliding just beneath the surface. The fisherman followed with his eyes. They moved with purpose, not hurried, not afraid, just certain. Then, one by one, they disappeared into deeper water, gone from sight. The fisherman stood alone. The sky darkened further. The first drops of rain touched the surface, soft, then more. The storm arrived slowly, wind building, waves rising. But the fisherman had already turned back. He did not take the boat out that night. He did not need to understand why. He only needed to listen, and he had. These moments are not rare. They come and go like the weather itself. The Selkies are often seen before a storm, not as warning, not a sign, but as presence, as part of the same shifting pattern. A woman once stood at her window during a long evening. The sky was filled with low clouds. The light barely touched the land. The sea stretched out in quiet gray lines. She watched for a long time. Then she noticed a single movement, a form rising just beyond the waves. Still, watching the shore, it remained there through the fading light, through the first stirrings of wind, through the slow arrival of rain. Then, just before the storm fully came, it slipped beneath the surface, gone. The woman closed the window, not quickly, just with care, as if the moment had completed itself. There are smaller moments too. A child walking with a parent along the shore. The sky dim with cloud. The wind gentle but steady. They pause near the rocks. The child points, a shape in the water, then another, brief, barely visible. The parent does not speak, only places a hand on the child's shoulder. They stand there together, watching, until the shapes disappear. Then they turn back, the moment held, nothing explained, nothing needed. The sea does not separate itself from the sky. The sky does not separate itself from the water, and the Selkies move within both. Not bound, not directed, just part of the same quiet system. Storms come, storms pass, the waves rise, the waves fall, and through it all, the presence remains. Not constant in sight, but constant in feeling. There are nights when the storm has already passed. The air cool and clear again, the water still unsettled, small waves moving in uneven patterns. A Selkie rises near the shore. The sky above is open now, stars faintly visible through drifting clouds. The wind has softened. The Selkie remains at the surface, still, as if listening to what remains after the storm. The water carries the memory of movement, but it is fading. Slowly, everything returns, not to what it was, but to something quieter, something steadier. The Selkie turns, moves gently away from the shore, back into deeper water. The sky clears further, the horizon settles, and the night becomes calm again. It was not gone, only passing, only moving through as all things do. And now, as the wind quiets once more, the sea stretches out beneath a softer sky. The surface smooth, the light faint and distant, no sign of what has passed, and yet something remains, not seen, only felt. The shore is quieter now, not empty, just settled. The tide has drawn a long breath, and slowly it begins to return. The water moves with a softer rhythm, no urgency, no force, only a steady coming back. This is how it happens, not all at once, not with sudden change, but with a quiet knowing. The Selkie feels it before anything shifts, not as a sound, not as a call, but as something familiar, something that has always been there, a pull, gentle, certain. They may be standing on the shore, feet pressed into cool sand, the air resting lightly around them, or inside a quiet home, fire low, light dim and steady. It does not matter. The feeling reaches them all the same. It does not ask. It does not wait. It simply is. There's a story told in the quietest voices of a Selkie who lived many years on land, long enough for the days to feel the same, long enough for the seasons to pass without notice. There was warmth there, a home, a life shaped by routine. Morning light through a small window, the sound of wind along the walls, the steady rhythm of footsteps across worn floors. Nothing was missing, and yet something remained, unspoken, unseen. The Selkie would pause sometimes, in the middle of a task, hands still, breath quiet, as if listening, not for a sound, but for something deeper, something that could not be named. Years passed this way, softly, until one evening the light changed. The sky was dim, the horizon blurred into a quiet gray. The sea stretched out beyond the shore, calm, still. The Selkie stepped outside, barefoot, the ground cool beneath their feet. The air carried a faint scent of salt, and in that moment the knowing returned. Not new, not sudden, but clear. It had always been there. Now it could no longer be set aside. The Selkie walked toward the shore, each step slow, measured, not hesitant, not unsure, just certain. The path felt familiar, even after so long, even after years away. The shoreline opened before them, wide, quiet, the tide low and waiting. There was no one else there. No sound but the water, no movement but the slow breath of the sea. The Selkie stopped at the edge, looked out. The horizon did not change. It never does, but something within them did. They knelt, hands resting lightly on the sand, the grains cool, soft against their skin. For a moment they remained still, not in hesitation, not in doubt, but in recognition. This was always the path. The seal skin lay hidden nearby. It had been kept, not forgotten, never forgotten. The Selkie reached for it, slowly, as if touching something both distant and known. The surface felt familiar, smooth, worn by water. They held it close, for a moment, a quiet pause between two lives. Then the movement began. The skin settled around them, not as something separate, but as something returning. The change was gentle, as it had always been. The human shape softened. The seal form emerged, complete, whole. The Selkie moved forward, into the water. The cold did not startle. The depth did not resist. It welcomed. The waves closed softly behind. No mark remained, no trace on the shore, only the slow return of the tide. There are other moments, smaller, quieter still. A man once stood at the edge of the sea at dusk, the sky dim, the light fading. He had come there often, not searching, only remembering. That evening felt different, not in a way he could name, just quieter. He watched the water for a long time. Then he saw it, a shape near the surface, still, not approaching, not retreating, just there. He did not move closer, did not call out. Something in him understood. This was not a moment to hold, only to witness. The shape remained for a time, then slowly it turned, slipped beneath the water, gone. The man stood there until the light faded completely. Then he turned back, carrying the moment with him, not as loss, but as something complete. There is no struggle in these endings, no sudden breaking, only a quiet release, because the Selkie was never divided. Not truly. They lived in both worlds, but belonged to one. And when the time comes, that belonging becomes clear. It was not gone, only waiting, only beneath the surface of every moment. The sea does not forget. It does not close its paths. It remains, steady, endless, and the Selkie returns, not as departure, but as completion. The shore grows quieter as the tide rises. The sand fades beneath the water. The line between land and sea softens once more. And somewhere beyond the reach of sight, something moves again. Not leaving, not arriving, just returning to where it has always been. The night has grown deeper now. The shoreline is almost gone from view. The sea stretches outward without edge. The waves move softly, slow, steady. Everything feels quieter than before. Not empty, just settled. You have followed the tide this far, through quiet shores, through dim waters, through moments that came and passed like breath. And now, there is nothing left to follow. Only stillness, only rest. The stories of the Selkies do not end. They never have. They continue beneath the surface, in places where no path is marked. But for now, they grow softer, more distant, like waves that have moved beyond the shore. You may still feel them, a quiet rhythm, a gentle motion beneath everything. It does not ask you to stay awake. It does not ask you to listen closely. It only remains, soft, fading, like the last light slipping from the sky. There is a final story, not of arrival, not of departure, but of quiet return. A figure stands at the edge of the water, not young, not old. The years have passed gently. The night air rests against their skin. Cool, calm. They do not hurry. There is no need. The tide is low, the shore wide and open. The sky holds a faint shimmer of distant stars. They have walked this path before, many times, in thought, in memory. But tonight is different. Tonight, there is no turning back. Not because something is ending, but because something has already settled. The figure steps forward. The sand shifts beneath their feet. Soft, the water meets them slowly. Cold, but familiar. They pause, only for a moment, not in doubt, just in recognition. The sea breathes around them, a quiet, endless motion. They take another step, then another, until the water rises, until the shore begins to fade behind them. There is no sound but the tide, no movement but the gentle rise and fall of the surface. They reach the place where the water deepens, where the world begins to change, and there, waiting as it always has, is the skin, not placed, not hidden, simply present, as if it had never left. The figure bends, hands brushing the surface. They lift it slowly, the texture familiar, the weight known. For a moment, they hold it close, a quiet pause between what was lived and what has always been. Then the movement begins, soft, unbroken. The skin settles around them, and the change returns, not sudden, not strange, only true. The human shape fades. The Selkie remains, whole, complete. They move forward into the water. No hesitation, no resistance. The sea receives them. The surface closes softly behind. No trace remains, only the steady motion of the tide, only the quiet breath of the ocean. The night continues. The stars drift slowly above. The shoreline rests beneath the dark. And somewhere, far beneath the surface, something moves. Not separate, not lost, only where it has always belonged. It was not gone, only quieter, only farther away. And now, as the waves soften and the night deepens, you can let everything drift. There is nothing more to follow, nothing more to hold, only the gentle rhythm that remains. Thank you for spending this quiet time with the Sleepy Legends channel, for listening, for drifting, for allowing the stories to carry you here. There will be more shores, more quiet waters, more stories that move softly through the night. You are always welcome to return. But for now, there is only rest, only the slow fading of sound, only the calm that settles when everything else grows still. Let the tide carry you. Let the waves move gently beneath your thoughts. And let sleep come quietly, as it always does, without effort, without sound, Good night.